You pay your taxes. You see the deductions on your paycheck. You see the sales tax at the register. You write the check for your property tax every year. This is the visible contract you have with your government. You give them a portion of your labor, and in exchange, they provide civilization. But what if I told you that the most effective tax you pay, the one that drains more wealth from your life than any other, is one you never voted for? It never appears on a ballot. It is never debated in Congress. It doesn't even have a name on your bank statement. It is called inflation. We are told inflation is a natural disaster, like a hurricane or a drought. Politicians blame it on supply chains or corporate greed. Central bankers call it a temporary phenomenon. But history tells a different story. Inflation is not an accident. It is a policy. It is a deliberate, calculated mechanism designed to transfer wealth from you, the saver, the worker, the citizen, to the state. The government has a secret. They are drowning in $36 trillion of debt. They have promised trillions more in pensions and Social Security that they cannot pay. Mathematically, they have only two choices. They can default and admit they are bankrupt, or they can print the money and let inflation eat away the value of what they owe. They have chosen option 2. They want your money to die, because when your money dies, their debt dies with it. Welcome to the Financial Coin Historian. Today, we are going to expose the dual imperative. We will strip away the academic jargon of quantitative easing and yield curve control to reveal the brutal truth underneath: financial repression. We will show you how the Roman emperors did it, how the kings of France did it, and how the Federal Reserve is doing it right now. This is the story of the silent theft, and once you see it, you will never look at a dollar bill the same way again. To understand why your money is losing value, you have to look at the mandate of the people managing it. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, they all have a public mission. They say their goal is price stability. They define stability as an inflation rate of 2%. Think about that for a second. If you hired a security guard to protect your house and he told you his goal was to ensure only 2% of your furniture was stolen every year, would you call that stability? No, you would call it theft. At 2% inflation, the value of your money is cut in half every 35 years. A dollar saved in your 20s is worth 50 cents by the time you retire. This is the public explanation, the technical imperative, the fear of deflation. Central bankers are terrified of one thing more than anything else: deflation. Deflation is when prices fall. To you, that sounds great. Cheaper gas, cheaper food, cheaper rent. But to a government loaded with debt, deflation is death. When prices fall, wages fall, but the debt stays the same. If the government owes $36 trillion and the economy shrinks, that debt becomes harder and harder to pay. It creates a spiral of defaults that could collapse the entire banking system. So, the central banks operate on an asymmetric risk assessment. They believe that destroying the value of your money a little bit every year, inflation, is better than risking the collapse of the debt system, deflation. They create a buffer zone. They target 2%, not because it helps you, but because it protects them from the void. The effective lower bound, ELB. There is another technical reason. Central banks manage the economy by lowering interest rates during recessions. But if inflation is zero, interest rates are usually low. If a crisis hits, they can't cut rates below zero, at least not easily. By targeting positive inflation, they keep interest rates higher in normal times, giving them policy space to cut rates when the economy crashes. In simple terms, they keep your cost of living rising so they have ammunition to bail out the system when it breaks. But this technical explanation is just the tip of the iceberg. The real reason, the secret reason, lies much deeper. It lies in the terrifying math of the national debt. The United States government is currently running deficits of nearly $2 trillion a year. The national debt has surpassed $36 trillion. The debt to GDP ratio is over 120%, a level historically seen only during total war. We are living in a state of fiscal dominance. Fiscal dominance happens when the government's debt is so large that the central bank loses its independence. The central bank can no longer focus on fighting inflation. Its primary job becomes keeping the government solvent, the interest spiral. Here is the trap. The government has to pay interest on that $36 trillion. If the Federal Reserve raises interest rates to fight inflation, then the interest payments on the national debt explode. We are already seeing this. The U.S. government now spends more on interest payments than it does on the entire defense budget. If rates go too high, the government goes broke. They can't pay the interest without borrowing more money, which creates more inflation. So, the central bank is forced to keep interest rates artificially low, even if inflation is high. They have to let inflation run hot. They have to burn your purchasing power to save the treasury. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is accounting. The government's need for solvency creates a structural floor under inflation. They need your money to lose value because they are paying their debts in devalued currency. This brings us to the core mechanism of the theft. Economists have a polite name for it: financial repression. Financial repression is a set of policies designed to channel funds from you, the private saver, to the public government at a price that is lower than the market would demand. The mechanism: negative real interest rates. The most powerful tool of financial repression is the negative real interest rate. Here is how it works. Let's say inflation is 5%. Prices are going up by 5%. But the bank only pays you 1% interest on your savings. The real interest rate is negative 4%, 1% minus 5%. Every year you leave money in the bank, you lose 4% of your purchasing power. That value doesn't just vanish, it is transferred. It is transferred from you, the creditor, to the government, the debtor. The government borrowed money from you via bonds or bank deposits. They pay you back 1% interest, but the money they pay you back with is worth 5% less. They have effectively wiped out a portion of their debt for free. It's a historical blueprint. We have seen this before. After World War II, the United States had a massive debt to GDP ratio of 122%. How did they reduce it? Did they run huge budget surpluses? Did they pay it off with hard work? No, they used financial repression. For decades, the Federal Reserve kept interest rates low while inflation ran higher. From 1945 to 1980, real interest rates were negative roughly half the time. This liquidation effect reduced the debt to GDP ratio from 122% to roughly 30%. They inflated the debt away. They paid for World War II by slowly stealing the savings of the generation that fought it. And now, facing a debt crisis even larger than WIPO, they are dusting off the same playbook. Inflation is often described as a rising tide that lifts all boats. This is a lie. Inflation is a river, and where you stand in the river determines whether you drink or drown. This is the Cantillon effect, named after the 18th century economist Richard Cantillon. He discovered a simple truth: money is not neutral. When new money is created, it enters the economy at a specific point. The first receivers versus the last receivers. Who gets the new money first? The government. They spend the newly printed money to fund wars, welfare, and contracts. They buy goods and services at today's prices. The banks and Wall Street, they receive the liquidity from the Federal Reserve. They use it to speculate, buying stocks and real estate before prices rise. Who gets the money last? You. The wage earner, the pensioner, the saver. By the time the new money trickles down to your paycheck, prices have already risen. The government and the banks stole the purchasing power from your dollar before you even touched it. You're paying higher prices to fund their spending. And the winners and losers. Academic research confirms this. Inflation acts as a massive wealth transfer. The winners, the government, the biggest debtor, and young middle-class households with huge fixed-rate mortgages. Their debts are wiped away by inflation. The losers, retirees living on fixed incomes, savers holding cash, and foreign nations holding U.S. debt. Inflation is a tax on the past to fund the present. It punishes those who saved and rewards those who borrowed. It is the ultimate moral hazard. There's another term you need to know: Seigniorage. Seigniorage is the profit the government makes by printing money. It costs the U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing about 14 cents to print a $100 bill. But that bill buys $100 worth of goods. The difference, $199.86, is profit for the issuer. In a modern digital economy, the cost is even lower. It costs $0 to type an extra 0 on a digital ledger. When the Federal Reserve monetizes the debt, when it prints money to buy government bonds, it is essentially funding the government for free. This allows politicians to spend money without raising taxes. Raising taxes is unpopular. It loses elections. Printing money is invisible. It wins elections. They can fund a war, a stimulus check, or a corporate bailout, and you feel good about it. You only pay the bill months or years later at the grocery store. If you think this is a modern invention, think again. The desire to steal wealth through inflation is as old as money itself. Rome, the death of the denarius. In the 3rd century AD, the Roman Empire was crumbling under the weight of endless wars and a bloated bureaucracy. The emperors couldn't raise taxes enough to pay the legions, so they turned to the mint. They began to debase the silver denarius. They mixed base metals like copper into the silver. Under Augustus, the coin was 95% silver. By the time of Claudius II, it was 0.02% silver. The result? Runaway inflation. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Merchants refused to accept the coins. The economy reverted to barter. The empire didn't just fall to barbarians. It rotted from the inside because it destroyed its own money. France. The assignats. During the French Revolution, the new government was broke. They issued paper money called assignats, backed by confiscated church land. But they couldn't stop printing them. By 1795, hyperinflation had destroyed the economy. A loaf of bread cost a wheelbarrow of cash. The currency collapse led directly to the rise of Napoleon, a dictator who promised order. Weimar Germany, the wheelbarrow economy. After WWI, Germany owed massive war debts. They chose to print. We all know the images. Children playing with stacks of cash, people burning money for heat. But remember why they did it. They did it to pay off sovereign debt with worthless paper. It was a state policy of liquidation that spiraled out of control. Today, the United States is in the same trap. But the scale is global. Since the Nixon shock of 1971, when the dollar was delinked from gold, there has been no restraint on money creation. We have lived through 50 years of credit expansion. Now, the bill is coming due. The fiscal space is exhausted. The government has made promises it cannot keep in real terms. They have three options. Austerity, cut Social Security, Medicare, and defense by 50%. Political suicide. Default, tell bondholders they won't get paid. Global financial collapse. Inflation, print the money. Pay the debts in nominal terms, but destroy the value. The secret strategy. They will choose option 3. They are choosing option 3. The 2% target is a floor, not a ceiling. In the coming decade, we are likely to see financial repression intensify. Yield curve control, capital controls, and persistently high inflation will be used to liquidate the debt mountain. The government wants your money to die, not because they hate you, but because they need your wealth to survive. They are cannibalizing the purchasing power of the citizenry to keep the state apparatus floating. This is the dual imperative. They need stability to keep the game going, but they need inflation to pay the bills. They will walk the tightrope, and you will be the safety net. So, what can you do? You must opt out of the liquidation machine. If you hold cash, you are the victim. If you hold government bonds at low rates, you are the victim. You must hold assets that cannot be printed. Real assets, land, real estate, commodities, things that have intrinsic utility, hard money, gold and silver, the eternal hedge against government stupidity. Equities, ownership in productive businesses that can raise prices with inflation. Debt, fixed rate debt, like a mortgage, puts you on the same side of the trade as the government. You pay back the bank with cheaper dollars. History is clear. The denarius died, the assignat died, the Weimar mark died. The dollar is dying slowly by design. Do not let your labor and your legacy die with it. This is the financial coin historian. The theft is silent, but now you can hear it.